Hey guys, it's Hank from Sprues and Brews, and I'm back today with part 2 of my tutorial on nets, tarps, and Hessian tape for 135 scale Commonwealth armor. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, check it out here. That's going to walk through all the construction process for the camouflage elements we're going to paint and weather now. Here's our little Churchill tank from last time, all painted and weathered up, and I think she looks pretty good. So stay tuned and I'll take you through the process of how we got here. Also, if you want to pick up some Sprues and Brews merch, there's going to be a link down below. You can see a nice little t-shirt here. Hop over to the Zazzle store if you want to support the channel and pick something up for yourself. Got lots of nice glassware, coasters, whatever you need. Alrighty, with all that said, let's get into it. Alright guys, so here's our painted up Churchill tank. This has been sprayed with 2 coats of Camo Mig Olive Drab, a dark olive drab base and a light olive drab base. For the actual hand brushing of the tarps, you can be pretty flexible with your palette here. I'm using a WWII green, but as long as you find some colors that contrast your olive drab well, you'll be all set. As I mentioned in the previous build video, I like to overlay the tarps so they look like one big running tarp. So this whole piece here, I'm going to paint this same WWII green. For the tarp on our bow here, I'm going to use this German Camo beige. It's a nice pop and really stands out against the green background. And for our last tarp, I'm going to use this Camo Mig Camo green. It's a nice, bright, vibrant frog green, and I think it looks really good on the back of the turret here. Alright, now that we've brush painted those tarps, we're going to move on to the nets. For this phase, we're going to do some dry brushing to really pop those details. As you could just see, I'm using Ammo's Camo green acrylic paint. But for this phase, you can really use any green that's a lighter tone than the base paint that you put on the vehicle itself. For those of you that aren't familiar with the dry brushing technique, all you need to do is load your brush with paint and then wipe off as much as you can on a piece of paper towel. You just want to leave a little bit left on the bristles. What this effect does is it takes that little bit of paint that's left on the brush and hits those raised details. For something like this with netting, it's really effective, as you can see here, because it just pops the highest details and it doesn't affect the paint that's below on the vehicle itself. Here you can start to see that contrast already. We're going to use that same technique on all the netting that's on the vehicle. Okay, here we are with that first coat of dry brushing. Already starting to look pretty good. I like to do a second pass with an even lighter color. Here I'm using a German Camo beige, but you can use any khaki color that you have. This contrast might look a little aggressive and cartoony at first, but stick with it. Once we finish the weathering techniques later on, it's going to look really good. If you get a little bit of the dry brush color on the armor itself, don't sweat it. We're going to cover it up with weathering effects later. If it's still wet and you can get it off with a little water and a paper towel, that's great, but otherwise, don't worry about it. Okay, with both of those dry brush colors added, we're starting to see a ton of contrast between the vehicle itself and this net. With the dry brushing complete, we're going to move on to painting the Hessian strips themselves. This is a pretty tedious process, so get yourself a nice small brush and take your time doing it. We're going to use a variety of colors here. I'm starting off with a dark camo green. I believe it's a German camo green. As long as you use anything that's in a color palette that's believable for this time period, it's going to work great. Alright, moving on to our second color here. I'm using a German camo brown. It stands out pretty well next to this dark green that we used before, so I'm going to try and use this on the strips that are closest to the greens I just painted. What we're trying to create here is a random natural look. We don't want a bunch of greens together or a bunch of browns together. We want variation between the individual strips to make it look like a confusing, camouflage disruptive scheme. For this third color, I'm using the same beige that we used for the dry brushing. This is going to be the lightest tone that we use on the Hessian tape. For this fourth color, I've got another dark camo green. This is a little bit different than the one that we used first, and again, going to just provide subtle variations between the colors here. We're going to keep working until we get all of these strips hand painted. We don't want to leave anything that base coat color that we started with. Here you can see I'm using that light khaki again. Alright, and we're starting to look pretty good here. Take a peek, make sure you got all of the strips painted, you didn't miss any, and then we'll be ready to move on to weathering. Alright, to start weathering, we're going to use Camo's Dark Wash. Important to note here, before we move to this step, I've clear coated the entire vehicle with a gloss coat. You can apply this pretty liberally. We just want to put it on any of the areas where the net is touching the turret, and it's going to soak right into those crevices, and it's going to really saturate the net itself. This is a really nice effect because it makes the vehicle look kind of grimy, like it's been in the field for a while, and it creates an artificial shadow in that space between the net and the turret itself. Also worth noting here, I did apply a pin wash to the vehicle itself just because I wanted to weather that as well. I'm not going to get into that here because the focus today is on these camouflage effects, but just so you know, if you see some, shadows already on the paint job, that's because I've weathered those pieces separately. Alright, now it looks like the net has some actual weight to it because of these shadows, which is awesome. That's exactly what we're looking for, and I'm really loving how this is going so far. I won't talk through it, but we're going to do the exact same thing on the hull netting. Okay, now that the nets are taken care of, we're going to move on to the Hessian strips. You're just going to use that same Camo Dark Wash and paint a little bit on each one of the individual strips. If you go too heavy, just try and pull a bit off with a clean brush. That's all we need to do for those Hessian strips, so just be patient, let those dry, and we'll move on to the next step. To weather these tarps, we're going to use Camo's Enamel Dark Wash once again, and just put a liberal coating in all the nooks and crannies of the tarp. I like to go pretty heavy with this effect. It's going to look pretty grimy at first. When it dries, it'll be a little more subtle, but down the road, if you put dust effects or any other weathering over these, it's going to just blend everything in and make it look really natural. And with those finished, that's it for our weathering techniques. So let's take a peek at the finished product. And here it is, our finished Churchill tank with all of those camouflage elements. We've got nets, we've got tarps, and we've got Hessian tape on the barrel. Super happy with how this came out. I think this adds a ton of character to any Commonwealth vehicle you're working on. So for modelers out there looking for a nice little challenge, give this a go. You'll notice I didn't add any mud or dust on this vehicle. I wanted to keep it pretty clean just so we could focus on these camo elements, but I'll come back and add those later. So thanks for joining me today. I hope you got something out of this video and you can try some of these techniques on one of your own builds. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Cheers!